The following is a fan-based discussion, and all materials being discussed are owned by Toei and Subaraya Productions. I claim no ownership to the materials being discussed and is purely fan opinion.
Hello everyone and welcome back to TFX First Impressions. In this video, I'll be talking about my first impressions of the first 4 episodes of Ultraman Omega, the newest Ultra series. As usual, starting with the opening first. I think it's alright. It's just something about it doesn't exactly hook me in. The visuals are good. The song itself is not bad, but I don't feel much really after listening to it. And I can't really 100% explain why. I definitely like the ending theme more than the opening. I think it's because the opening doesn't really have anything catchy to it, like, or high energy, for example, like Zed's opening, or something like Trigger's opening, where they have pull the trigger, pull the trigger. Omega doesn't really have any of those in its opening, which is why it's not really doing much for me, but I'll admit it's not a bad song whatsoever. Alright, next onto Omega's design. I quite like it. It's very simple, yes, but it's simple in a good way, unlike Arc, which the design was simple in a bad way. I do like the chest armor and the pattern from the neck down. Also, the design on the back of the suit is also pretty good. The only thing I'm feeling a little iffy on is the red face. On the one hand, I like that they went for something different because we don't see many Ultras with red faces. I mean, Omega's the first TV Ultra to have a red face. The only other red face Ultra in the entire franchise is Zerth, but he only appeared in the movies and one time in Ultra Galaxy Fight The Destined Crossword. However, at the same time, because it's so rare, it's also sort of weird as well. But I'll say this, the blue eyes definitely help. Overall, I'll say the design is quite good. I quite like it. Now, on to the episodes. I'll say this, my favorite scene in this show so far is definitely the opening fight in the first episode, which was made entirely with CGI. And it took 5 months to actually make, by the way. If you count the planning process, then that would be 10 months. It paid off. That scene of Omega fighting the bug monsters in this giant structure was beautifully shot. Then he gets hit by a beam and falls to Earth, where we see his human form, and he gets amnesia as a result of the beam attack. I like the idea of it being set in a universe where kaijus didn't exist. I think that's very interesting. That being said, though, this show so far is very Monster of the Week heavy, or that it doesn't seem to show any hint towards a possible antagonistic force. Like, Arc also felt the same way, but at least that had hints of a mystery. This one, not so much. Well, I'm not gonna say it has no mystery going for it, because I feel like Soruto, who is Omega, his identity and who he really is may be an important plot point. Think back to previous New Generation Ultras where the Ultra has a human form, such as Orb and Jeed. Like with Jeed, we find out in his show that he was born as essentially a genetic clone of Ultraman Belial. Omega's backstory and the structure in which he was fighting in the very beginning, I can definitely see these being important plot points. But there's no hint of a main villain. Monster of the Week can still work well, like with Ultraman X, for example, I feel like the main thing that this show is hooking me with is the dynamic between the two male leads, Sorto and Kosei, who is a warehouse worker. This is the second Ultra show I'm watching as it airs. The first one being Decker, because I watched Blazer after it finished airing, and I didn't start watching Arc as it aired until the debut of Galaxy Armor. I like how Omega doesn't have a human name from the get go because he gets his human name from Kosei in episode 2. Also, seeing him learn from Kosei how the human world works is something we haven't seen in a long time. Because from what I remember, the last time the Ultra really felt like an alien was Mebius. The scene where Kosei first meets Sorto, I think is one of the most hilarious scenes in the show by far. Actually, it would probably be the most hilarious scene, actually. Like, we see him briefly after he first falls to Earth and he's naked, wearing a necklace which he uses to transform. The next thing you know, he breaks into the warehouse where Kosei is working and living in, by the way. The moment they see each other, he's eating Kosei's yakisoba. And the pause, oh my god. And the way Kosei reacts, oh my god, is the greatest because he's like, hey, that's my lunch. Well, maybe not in this tone, but that's more or less what he said. Then Soroto just rummages through his things and drops them, which makes sense because he would have spent majority of his time in space. Let's talk about something that isn't really working that well for me though. The fights. Coming off of Blazer and Arc, the fight choreography in this show does not compare to either. It's not bad, but something about the way it's shot isn't that great. Omega has this unique hand thing where apparently is his way of analyzing the kaiju's moves before he fights. I'll be honest with you, when I first saw this in the first episode, like when you first did it, and the way it was shot in the first episode, I thought that was a choke move. It looked like he was gonna choke the kaiju. In a lot of scenes, he has his hands down, and I like how we don't see his beam finisher in the first episode. Instead, he uses his slugger to kill the kaiju. Speaking of which, he's the first Ultra since Zero to have a slugger as a weapon, and the Omega Slugger is also his transformation device. Another positive thing I'll bring up is the transformation sequence. The way he summons it is also pretty cool, where he basically does like a chopping motion in front of his forehead, and the slugger gets summoned and it flies around him for a bit before he catches it. And I like how the slugger opens up and it like forms the chest first before it changes the rest of the body. The dynamic between Kosei and Soroto is definitely keeping me hooked, mainly because of how different their personalities are, as Soroto's voice is a lot softer, and the one time he says delicious was funny as hell, compared to Kosei, who's louder and much more high energy than Soroto is.
Also, we have Ayumu, who I'm really liking so far as a character, as much as we haven't got much from her at the moment. And I love how both Soroto and Kosei refer to her as Ayune, an older sister essentially, though it's funny how when Soroto says it, she responds by saying, aren't we more or less the same age? She's a biologist at the National Center for Natural Research, so her job is to research the kaijus. Again, makes sense since they've never seen kaijus before. It also makes sense why Kosei makes Soroto hide his identity as Omega, because just like kaijus, the people haven't met any aliens before, and if they do, they'll want to research them, which by then freedom wouldn't really be an option. In regards to her, something I'm curious about is when will she find out Omega's true identity? Because in episode 2, when we first see her, Soroto almost transforms in front of her, similar to how he transformed in front of Kosei in episode 1. The second time in episode 3, he pulls out his transformation device in front of her, and I was genuinely surprised that they managed to get away with it. Kosei lies about it being a magic trick, and I'm surprised she just bought that. Speaking of episode 3, the trio went to the place where Soroto landed after falling to Earth, and there Kosei finds Rechinus. Apparently, these are based on the four Chinese mythical beasts. Rechinus is Azure Dragon, and Trigoron is White Tiger, which will debut in episode 7. I'm liking how one, it's Kosei bonding with Rechinus, because Rechinus grows big after it resonated with him, and two, Kosei and Soroto fight together. Well, more or less, because yeah, Kosei is simply ordering Rechinus to do something, which I'll admit, I initially thought that Kosei would merge with the kaiju, and that's not a bad idea. By combining with Rechinus, Omega gets his first armor upgrade, which comes with a sword. And I freaking love the finisher of this form, where he cuts the kaiju into a million pieces. This happens in episode 4, and speaking of which, we get a returning actor, Captain Hibiki, the team captain of Super Guts in Diner. I really liked him, and we find out that he allowed Kosei to live in a warehouse, as he's the owner. From this, I feel like Kosei will have a lot of focus because, yeah, he works at a warehouse, but he doesn't really know what he wants to do. So I definitely see that as being his storyline in this show. Just a few minor things. I'm interested in how the next episode will play out, as Sorto goes somewhere by himself, and the radio hosts do the next episode previews, which I also quite like. I think Omega has a very promising start. Yeah, it definitely doesn't have as strong of a start as, let's say, Blazer, which even though I didn't watch that one as it aired, it absolutely had a very strong beginning. However, this show has some interesting and good ideas, some good acting, and some good chemistry between the three main cast members. So I'm definitely interested in seeing where the show goes onwards from this point, especially in regards to like Sorato's backstory and who our main antagonistic force will be. Anyways, that's my first impressions of Ultraman Omega. Comment down below what you think of Ultraman Omega so far. Don't forget to like and subscribe and stay tuned for the next video. Bye everybody!